we see a much broader tale of the relationship and its ups and downs, its challenges, its goals kind of become the thing that we observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jackson, that's Jacob. We're here, we're still right in the middle of our themed month, or I guess we've just crossed the middle of our themed month. We've been on the theme of Marriage Month this season, and we are excited to continue the conversation today with this script, Bright Half-Life by Tanya Barfield.
Yeah, just as a sort of random coincidence, the day that we're recording, I also sort of was listening through, doing all the checks and stuff that we do on the episode that we talked about last week on The Light by Loy A. Webb. So if you're listening to this episode, it will have been the themed month from this past Monday. And I remembered how great that play was and how jazzed we were by the conversation. And then it was like, then getting into this episode about this really great play, I was like, what a privilege. I mean, these are just two... all the plays of theme month are awesome, but you got like a Neil Simon, which is sort of what you expect. I mean, you did a Shakespeare, which is sort of what you expect, and then you get these two, fairly contemporary scripts about like pressing issues of now, about that are really simple, intimate stories that have these really clever theatrical ways of reaching into the audience. There's just The Light and then Bright Half-Life this week as a pair. It's just such a privilege. Those are just both such great plays.
Absolutely. Super grateful that we get to have these conversations. Grateful that we get to talk about these scripts, read these scripts. Before I started doing this podcast and before we started kind of getting together and doing these, I would no chance I would have like read as broadly with these. So it's great to have a chance to read these plays and continue conversations with all of you about them. Excited for the chance to continue it today.
Yeah, this will be, I think, a really interesting conversation because this is a play that almost like needs the conversation to like fully be what it is. And actually in a similar way to the way that The Light, because The Light was part of this larger cultural conversation, and Bright Half-Life is too, but it is also, the play is kind of a mystery, or it requires some parsing out because of the way that it's written, the way that the story is presented. And when we get into our conversation, I'm sure we'll talk about some other plays that sort of work similarly. And so I think having that conversation about it is going to be just such a blast. I have no idea what we're going to talk about because there's so much there as always, and so I'm just excited about it.
Yeah, no, this play deals with time so interestingly. We're in and out of moments across a pretty broad spectrum of time too. We've kind of been talking throughout the seasons about how like no one leaves or it's not the seasons during this theme month, about like how no one leaves the room, how some people will leave the room, how sometimes people are on stage or not on stage together. And this play is going to just blow all of those out of the water. Yeah, it's going to be super fun.
Yeah, what our 4 marriage plays so far have all taken place over fairly different amounts of time. And so it'll be interesting to see when we get into the 5th one next week, how we see whether that interacts in the same way or not. Knowing ahead of time what the play is, I can tell you that also will be very different from the rest of these. So, that's I don't know that we like planned that as we were picking the plays for our themed month, that time would also be one of the variable factors in how the plays discuss marriage. But, marriage in Romeo and Juliet is very hastily done, right? They see each other, they fall in love, like the next day they're married. In Barefoot in the Park, you're seeing the several days right after the honeymoon. In The Light, you're seeing like the 70 minutes after the proposal. And in this play, you're seeing the 45 years of the whole relationship.
Yep. Yep. Really zooming out for this one for sure.
Yeah, it's just it's privilege. I just again, wow, the light and this play, what a great thing. Before we get too much more into it, we want to ask all of you out there to consider heading on over to Patreon. That's where we are supported. The folks over on Patreon help to make sure that this podcast happens, that it's possible. We love to do it. Our whole intro so far has been about how great it is to get to talk about plays like this. It's awesome. It's also just impossible for us. I mean, we could always talk about plays, but for us to run the podcast in this way, we couldn't do it without the financial support of the people over on Patreon. What they do is they agree to a monthly amount that they give to the running of the show. That's how Patreon works. There's also different rewards that you get based on the different tiers. We always like to say, though, the biggest reward is that you know that you're contributing to something that gives your life value. So if you think you're getting value out of the time you spend with No Script, I just encourage you to check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast. That's all one word, no hyphens, no underscores. That's where you can become a supporter. The lowest tier is just $1 a month, $12 total over the course of the year. And with that is hugely valuable. You become a supporter of the many fantastic supporters. We encourage everybody to at least think about that level. $12 every year. I mean, that's, as I've said many times in the past, I know a lot of people that if I were just like, hey, I need $12. Don't ask why, but I need it. They'd be like, well, okay, $12. It's just $12. So at least think about it. Check us out over there. Patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast. To our supporters, huge thank you. This episode, like all of our episodes, is brought to you by viewers like you. I'm stealing the old public television line. It's brought by viewers like you. So thanks so much to our patrons. Before we dive into Bright Half-Life, we also have something really exciting coming up on No Script that we want to let everybody know about because it's just a few short weeks away. Every season, we like to have a special guest join the podcast. This is an episode where either Jackson or I take the episode off and the other hosts a special guest to have a conversation about the script. Jackson and I love talking about plays. We've obviously done it, at this point, hundreds of episodes, so we love to do it, but we also know that our perspectives are just our perspectives. So we like to have other perspectives join us for at least an episode every season. So this season, I was joined by Dr. David Cody, who is the music director for the production of Into the Woods that we did here where I worked at the University of Montana. And so we're actually bringing Into the Woods back. We discussed Into the Woods early in No Script in season 3.
Yeah, a long time ago.
As part of Magic Month. And so this conversation, Dr. David Cody is a stellar musician and music director. I recorded that episode earlier this week as of when I'm recording this episode. So I know how great a conversation it was. If you're interested in music, in musical theater, Dr. Cody brought such an incredibly insightful perspective on what Sondheim is doing musically in that show, as well as some of the other incredible things that people who write for musicals do to contribute to the story and the themes. It's really great. It's going to just blow your mind. There's piano involved. You're going to hear some music. We're going to talk about some music. Check it out. It's just coming in just 2 short episodes from now. It'll come right after the end of themed month. So 2 weeks from now, you'll be able to see that episode. That'll be, again, talking about Into the Woods, our special guest episode for season 13. Hope you will join us for that. And now, back to the script.
There we go.
All right. So, Bright Half-Life is by Tanya Barfield, as we've said, new playwright to the podcast. So, we'll provide just a little bit of an overview of their career, and then Jackson will give us a little bit of a synopsis before we dive into a conversation about this great play. Tanya Barfield is out of Portland. I listened to a great conversation that she had when one of the theaters in Portland committed to doing their whole season based on her plays. They did 4 of her plays because she's out of Portland. She described what growing up in Portland was like and how it contributed to her writing. Really cool interview. She ended up going to NYU to study acting and then into the prestigious Juilliard Playwrights program. Then she ended up doing the literary management for Juilliard for a while, which is a cool job. I wish I could get that job. I mean, that would be awesome. Well done. Some of her plays you might recognize. Bright Half-Life, of course, we're talking about today. The Call, Blue Door. And so Bright Half-Life, The Call, and Blue Door were 3 of the 4 plays that were done when the theater in Portland did the season of her plays. She's also got plays like 121 Degrees West, The Houdini Act, Of Girl and Wolf, Pecan Tan, a play called The Quick. She ended up teaching playwriting for a while at the primary stages school at Bernard College at New York University. I don't think I've said the name of the theater in Portland yet. Profile Theater is the name of the theater in Portland. They had the sort of cool idea, because she's a Portland local, making a whole season based on her stuff. So she was out there doing that. In 2020, she replaced Marcia Norman, the great playwright Marcia Norman, as the co-director of the Eschisen program. She's an alumni of New Dramatists. She's a member of the Dramatists Guild. She is in the 2020 Writers Guild she received the 2020 Writers Guild of America Award for television long form for her writing of a standalone episode of the show Miss America on FX. Supposedly, I've not seen it. I've only sort of listened to some of the interviews around it. Supposedly, that standalone episode that she wrote of Miss America is sort of generally held as the best episode of that show, that it's a real feat of writing and television. I'm going to go watch it now after this conversation, just because I was so delighted by her work in this play that now I want to see all the stuff that she's done. She won the 2016 Writers Guild of America Award for Television Dramatic Series for her work on The Americans. Yes, if you know and love The Americans, Tanya Barfield is she's staffed as one of the writers there. She also won a grant from the Lark for play development. She was honorable mention for the Kesselring Prize for Drama in 2005. She won the Helen Murrell Award for Emerging Playwrights. A lot of the playwrights we talk about, because we focus on contemporary American playwrights, have won that Helen Murrell Award. That is a great award to help establish an early career. So I'm not surprised to go back and see that. She won the 2013 Lilly Award. She was also nominated for a Primetime Emmy for that episode of Mrs. America, the episode called Shirley, as well as for the sort of her work on the whole series. This play, Bright Half-Life, was commissioned originally, and it had a sort of a early run at what's called the Women's. Let's make sure I get this exactly right. The world premiere in 2015 was at the Women's Project Theater in New York City, which is an off-Broadway theater in New York City. A lot of the materials from that production are still out and around. The marketing materials, the interviews, some clips and things like that. So that might be a great way to interact with this play digitally, be to go and check out some of that Women's Project Theater production. But that's not the theater that commissioned it. It was commissioned by Center Theater Group out of Los Angeles, and then did some development during her residency at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center's National Playwrights Conference. So 2015, as I said, that world premiere at Women's Project Theater. Then it goes to the West Coast, and it's at the Diversionary Theater in San Diego and the Magic Theater in San Francisco. That's West Coast premiere. Its Chicago premiere was at About Face Theater at Theater Wit in Chicago in 2017, and then it starts to get what we affectionately call to the regional professional theater circuit. Plays at places like the Kitchen Theater in Ithaca, at Actors Shakespeare Project in 2020. It plays at Theatrical Outfit in Atlanta in 2022, which means it did, just to point it out, bridge that gap, the death gap that is the COVID pandemic. Bright Half-Life is one of the plays that bridges that gap. 2022, the Road Theater Company in California. 2023, the Persephone Theater in Saskatoon, Canada. 2023, the District Theater in Indianapolis. 2024, earlier this year, at Williamston Theater in Michigan. It's also had several college productions, places like Loyola Marymount and Middlebury, which is college in Vermont. It's an interesting choice for an educational theater project because it's a two-hander. It is great because of, for reasons of representation in college theater, which continues to be a problem, of course, in theater worldwide, but kind of especially in educational theater. And so it's great for that, but it'd be tough for us to do it here for reasons of cast size. But a great show for it because of the characters are, together over 45 years. It's sort of like I don't know that it doesn't matter, but you could cast the actors as any age within that span, because there's always going to be a place where they're playing, you know, the characters at a different age than the actors actually are. And so it's one of those shows where, I mean, I think you could really cast college actors in this play as part of the play, not just like you're doing a play and there happen to be college actors.
Right. No, yeah, no, for sure. This play like lets you kind of get into playing a lot of different ages, which is fun to have a play like specifically call for it.
Yeah, and I
Instead of
wonder
like,
too. I mean, it'd be interesting to see like 10 productions of it or something. But like, does the age of the actors sort of subtly communicate to the audience what the present tense of the play is supposed to be? That's, you know, it's an outstanding question about a play that takes place over 45 years, and as you'll hear from Jackson, is told in this sort of fragmented way. You know, does casting college actors somehow put more emphasis on the scenes from when the characters are younger, because they match, you know, right?
sure, yeah.
And if you cast, I've seen productions, as I was looking through this production history, production photos, where the actors they look more like they're the retired characters with, you know, adult children who are married with children of their own, as they are at the very end of the story of the characters. That's like a whole, I mean, as I was looking at this production photo, I was like, that's a whole different version of this play, it seems like to me, even though it makes just as much sense as casting college actors.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that would be really cool to see like three or four different versions of it, all with different cast ages, and get to compare how it feels, which scenes get the weight. Excited to jump into the conversation about it today. I'm going to try to summarize this play, as we've already mentioned,
Good luck.
though. Yeah, as we've already mentioned, though, the play deals really interestingly with time in a way that sort of defies a summary. So even as I like try to do this summary, I'm sort of wrecking it. So I'm just going to do it quickly. And
There's
let
like
us
that.
get.
There's that timeline in the back of the script for like the characters' lives. What you just almost just like read that word.
Might
for
as
word.
well. That's sort of what I'm going to do, except I'm going to go even more helicopter just so we can get into the conversation, because there's so many great scenes in this play. This play focuses on two characters, Vicky and Erica. I'll read you their character descriptions as they appear in the script here real quick. Erica is a, quote, soft butch and should be played by a Caucasian actress. Vicky appears more traditionally feminine. An African-American, Latina, or Asian actress may play her. And then the time is, like we've already said, from 1985 through 2031. So this is a big time frame across these two characters' lives as they fall in love, as they get married, as they have children together, as they raise those children together, as they eventually fall out of love together. But we kind of pick up the play sort of midway through that journey, and that's kind of the theme of this play, is like jumping into moments along the journey without needing to be burdened by the direction of time. So we jump in kind of during the first proposal that happens. Erica, in a moment of grief after having they've already been in a relationship together for a long time, proposes to Vicky on the kind of night or the week that her father is dying. And then we jump all over the place. And so then I'll zoom out and do a summary. These two characters met at their work in 1985 somewhere. Vicky is Erica's supervisor, and they kind of navigate the difficulties of falling in love while being co-workers, while Vicky is still getting out of a different relationship with a man, and how that journey is working for her. Erica, as she's navigating being a kind of a temp employee / intern in this place, they find each other, though. They go on this date that is a wild ride with sort of like sickness and food poisoning mixed into it, perhaps, and up a Ferris wheel with various of Erica's nervousness around that. And these sorts of scenes play out over the whole script. The entirety of the script has scenes from this date night. There's another night of pretty high prominence, and that's the night I already mentioned, where after a season of being together, there's other scenes that kind of flip back and forth between those two moments. But there's the night that they have broken up. Erica comes over in grief for her father and proposes for the first time. Vicky says no, essentially, but that they do get back together as a result of that. Then there's a future night as well, where Erica does propose more out of grief moment to Vicky, and Vicky kind of like gets her to actually propose in a way that Vicky wants it to happen. It's important to note that the time frame of this play is really important in U.S. history. Those of you, I imagine many of our listeners do know the time frame of this play kind of being set within the years that LGBTQ marriage and the Supreme Court ruling on that issue came to be legalized in the United States. It covers the dates of 2004, wherein Massachusetts legalized gay marriage, and they directly make a reference to that in the script about let's go to Massachusetts and get married finally. And then there's the entirety of the play, again, spanning up to 2031, the future. It covers all the way through 2015, when it was the Supreme Court ruling actually came down about it. So that is a lot of the backdrop of this play. And the play continues then. So they eventually do get married. They have kids together. They raise these kids, and eventually Erica begins to fall out of love with Vicky, and the relationship starts to fall apart. I think there's a lot of complicated dynamics that we'll get into that as well. But eventually they do fall apart, kind of drift apart. There's one or two more meetings that are described, but then the next like big, significant, large moment. Well, no, there's marriages involved too. They like see each other at the kids' marriages. They have two daughters who both get married,
Twins.
or at least in. Twins, yes, and so they meet each other at those events as well, and scenes happen. But the final timeline scene is the scene where they kind of happen across each other as Vicky is getting a cancer diagnosis, and very far along, kind of stage 3.5, she says, and so they kind of have that next beat of connection where they've been long broken up. Erica's been in another relationship since then that Vicky knows about, and they kind of like have this still sharing life together even after the divorce beat of their relationship. Ends with a really impactful scene that I'm excited to talk about, where Erica has a very long monologue that brings back a lot of the refrains of the play, and finally it ends with them together one last time as the lights fade on this play. Kind of not knowing exactly how it all ends, though some assumptions are made, but the two of them together on stage end the play.
Yes, I mean, so that's the chronological view of their life story. The way that the play ends up is that you get these sort of flashes from scenes from all across that timeline. Suddenly, you're at the moment where she's told Vicky that she doesn't want to be, that she's thinking about getting a divorce, where Erica says they don't, divorce is along the line, but she, says she's collapsed is the language that she uses, and there's a fight about it. So you get a little flash of that scene. You get a little flash of their first date. Then suddenly you're at this moment where they're old, and there's the cancer diagnosis, and they're in the elevator together. Then you flash to what? Then you flash to a scene where they've got young kids and they're chasing them around the house. Then you flash to the wedding in these really quick. The scenes, some of them are a half page, some of them are a line, some of them are just a stage direction, some of them are 3 pages of dialogue and great kind of the stuff you're used to seeing, great character negotiation, advancing the plot, and things like that. Here's what the transitions sort of the scene note says. No transition should be manifested in the same way. Most time-place shifts are interruptive and jarring, like a jump cut. But there are also moments in which the transition is elliptical, almost blurry, and the temporal spatial change isn't initially clear.
Yeah. So here's what I love about that aspect of this play is sometimes plays do deliberately minimalistic design, but sort of like assign it to the play. Like this play should be minimalistic, low props, evocative structures and forms for your setting, and that works. Like that gets us into an imaginative space just fine. I love that the form of this play necessitates that, because you flip so quickly between these times and between the ages of these characters. There's no time for a quick change. There's no time for a set change. We're moving quickly, and that's like I feel like part of the urgency that this play creates is this fast move between these places and these times and these moments in these characters' lives, and it really like A, pulls you in, but B, necessitates some really creative stagecraft in the switching of these locales, using lights, using sound. It just makes you come alive, and it gives both the actors so much power and control over that switch, and the entire crew power and control over the storytelling of that switch.
Yeah, it's a lot of the audience reactions, the reviews, those like videos you see that are really popular now, the interview people in the lobby, like the kind of the reaction to the play tends to be that like what ends up happening is that it's kind of a mystery. Part of the experience of the play is that you figure out as you go along how to place these little scenes that you're getting, you know, in the larger picture of the relationship. You don't always know exactly where you are or why somebody said that line until later when you see it in context. And that's not, I mean, that's intentional. It was in the setting notes, Tanya says, lighting can accomplish what set pieces would, which is what you were speaking to, Jackson. And then the next piece of it is, in most cases, the sense of place should only become clear as the scenes progress. So this idea that you don't always know exactly what's going on and when it happened and where it happened, that's like an intentional part of how you experience this story.
Mm-hmm. It kind of makes this it focuses you. It's a little bit.
Yeah, good point.
It's just
Yeah.
a little bit Brechtian. Not quite. Let's leave Brecht out of it. But
Yeah, that'd
but
be
it,
best.
but it does provide you the ability to say I can't track
Yeah.
something, and so thus I'm going to track them.
Yes.
And so it centralizes their the heart of the show, which is the two of them moving through time together, and almost like in the way that memory jumps through time, of like, oh, I remember this moment and this moment and this moment, and we just like get to be there with them without having to like figure out the whole apparatus of how we're doing it.
Yeah, so I think this interview was the Profile Theater, the theater in Portland that did 4 of her plays as their season. I think this was a quote from the interview, that interview, but it could be from a different one, in which case I apologize. But she talks about why they wrote the script in this way, and that I'm not going to be able to come up with the exact quote, but basically the effect of it was, yes, life is lived chronologically. You know, you're always moving forward in time in your life. But when you think about your life, it's almost never chronological. You very rarely, and it'd be sort of odd to look back at your life and try to put a timeline to things.
Yeah.
You think about this moment, this thing, and then it leads you to think about this moment and this thing, and it leads you to think about this moment and this thing, and maybe you think about just that one sentence that was said. And then the next time you come upon that, you're thinking about the larger context of it. So the idea, I think, she didn't use the word memory, I remember distinctly, but it was about like thinking about your life, trying to put your life not in order, but in like making sense of it. It's like the most sense is made of your life, not chronologically.
Yeah. In these sort of like pieces that were as impactful as they were, that made you who you are. And so like the kind of consistency of returning to that Ferris wheel moment, returning to the nights of the elevator or in the doorway of the apartment, over and over we go back to these scenes, and there's even some sort of repetition of those locations. We multiple times we go to those locations in. Dang it, there's so many words. We go to those locations multiple instances over different times. And so the kind of continuous returning back again to kind of make sense of life via memory, via these moments for Vicky and Erica is really cool. It's really cool to get that sort of memory or internal journey as well.
Yeah, and it ends up being, this is, it's like an impressionist sort of
ethereal
life,
or
right? Yeah, where it's like you just get moments. You sort of live in the moments of the characters. And like we joked about earlier, at the back of the script, there is a timeline that lays out, exactly what happened when across the course of their lives that I mean, is just for the production team. I don't imagine that you present that to the audience at all. And I mean, I read through it, but it didn't really end up meaning that much to me when exactly things happened. I suppose it would if we were producing it in some way. But in just my experience of trying to just be with the story and with the characters, whatever, right? Like what year things happened and whether this happened before this, it was about seeing like how the individual moments get you to the next moment and seeing how knowing the context or not knowing the context of things changed your sort of perception of them.
Yeah, how kind of maybe with a little bit of remorse, how like wanting the full perspective of life and wishing that there was a way to have navigated it. I don't know how much do you think. I don't feel like a real regretful tone in this play, but there is like a longing in this play, and definitely like this "I will love you forever"ness about Vicky and Erica.
It's interesting. I was listening to a guy, I think he was in Chicago, just like some Chicago newscaster who was doing like the here's what's coming up in Chicago type of stuff, and was talking about A Bright Half-Life, and he described it as a sad play and said that sort of as if it were a fact. He was like, it is a sad play, but it's also blah, blah. And I was like, is it?
I don't know.
That's an interesting, I mean, I haven't seen it, and I think he probably had, so there's something to that, right? But it is like what happens in the play eventually is that they get divorced. And then, of course, at the very, very end, they meet many years later after their kids have grown up and been married, and she's got stage 3 cancer, and they decide to pursue a relationship again, or pursue at least togetherness again. So that is true, that in some ways, like, the part of what happens is like, you watch them fall in love and decide to get married and battle this societal, oppression of LGBTQ folks, and the time when LGBTQ marriages were illegal. You watch them go through all that, and you watch them get married, and then they get divorced, and it's like, oh crap, that sucks, But it's almost like the story told chronologically sucks. I mean, yeah. And I don't mean to imply that like their life sucks or anything, but just to say that like. The sadness, because if you think about like storytelling as a forward trajectory, this is not true of life. And I think this is what Tanya Barfield's doing with her arrangement of the story. But if in storytelling, right, this forward progression, it's like what happens at the end is what you're headed towards. And so if the end is that their relationship falls apart, it's like, well, crap. That is a sad story, But I think what Tanya Barfield is saying is that like that's not life. While we live life chronologically, it's not that we're constantly headed towards the most important part, right?
Yeah.
Where like everything's leading to some like in the later part of your life, climax of the story of your life, right? Life is moments. And so in the way that she's told the story, the divorce happens right alongside the moment where they sleep together for the first time, the moment where they decide who cares what our parents think, the moment where their children are being born, the moment where their children are getting married. And so I think taking the story out of its chronological telling is part of breaking down this idea that the divorce is the culminating feature, feature of the story, in the way that like Romeo and Juliet's death sort of is the culminating feature of that story.
Yeah, and I think I really agree with that like the play is intentionally set up, though it's the sucker punch towards the end of the play. But
about it from the beginning too, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yep. You have advanced warning about it. You kind of are engaged in it early. I mean, and then the like double down sucker punch of eventually Vicky's cancer. That like again leads us in that direction, but that's not where the play ends. The play ends. This whole play is this high energy back and forth between these two characters over and over and over. They are just like high energy, flipping between times, flipping between scenes, flipping all over the place. And then you get to the end, and there's this long monologue from Erica, just this really reflective piece about not wanting to leave, essentially wanting to go with wherever you go. I want to go. I'd fly with you. Over and over. A scene that I, amidst the summary, didn't mention was the skydiving theme keeps coming up. They're often in a plane preparing to skydive out, and that like skydiving sort of scene, or the evocation of that skydiving scene is what we end on. There's a countdown, like after this big monologue, Vicky returns to Erica. They do a countdown and they jump out of the plane / elevator / plane together again. And so like I think there's lots of things in this script that are doing just what you're talking about, Jacob, of kind of shifting our focus off of this like linear plot line and giving us much more, again, centralizing the relationship. What is the brightest part of this half-life together?
Yeah. And it's not like I don't know that the play like is like a defense of divorce or anything like that, but I do think that its perspective is that it all matters. Like there is like this kind of society trope or judgment that like, well, if you get divorced, your marriage and falling in love didn't matter. And in fact, Vicky, in the middle of their fight, where they really have it out, that really we get some scenes after they've decided to break up and divorce about the paperwork, but there's really one central scene for us where we see the relationship, just the decision to end the relationship in some way. This fight, and again, and the way that the story works, we see it in little snippets across all 80 minutes or whatever. But in that fight, one of the things Vicky says is like, it's half my life. You've now telling me that I've wasted half my life. She expresses this perspective, and I think what this play does is present itself as an argument against that. The idea that if the relationship ended, that then the relationship was meaningless and worthless, because that's sort of what linear storytelling is, right?
Right.
But this play says by breaking up that linearity, right, that it all matters. It all matters because it's not like we're getting there eventually. We're headed towards that. When you look back on your life, you're like, well, it all mattered. This mattered, and that little bit mattered, and that little bit mattered, and so it ends up being. Just to return to that guy who called it sad. It's like, I guess, like it's sad that they break up, and it's sad that she gets cancer, but it's also like. This is not like a super smart statement or anything, but it's like it's also just like life,
right?
Like people die. At the end of their, like, if you're going to watch this couple over the very beginning when they see each other to, far in the future, one of them is going to die. And, their relationship breaks up a couple of times over the course of it. I mean, like, you listening have had, like, breakups probably, right? And, like, have had people that die. And, like, so because of that stuff, do you then go, my life was sad? I think maybe that perspective is what the play argues against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of claims the richness of all the journey, of all the relationships along the way, the time spent along the way, in amidst the acknowledging of the difficult moments of life as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the long monologue at the end. It returns us to the opening scene, which is after they've broken up for, I think, the first time, and Erica's father's dying, and so Erica comes and proposes because of that. And what you learn, overseeing that scene different times over the course of the play, is that part of the reason they broke up is that when Vicky said, I love you, Erica didn't necessarily say it back, and then she said something to the effect of, like, it'll fade. Which is like, not what you want to hear in return. I do empathize with that. But you get their longer conversation about it, and you get this really beautiful monologue I'll just read a little snippet of it because I think it relates so well to this moment. Erica says, "You can tell that we might be one of those couples, major, not minor. And don't you think that I think we might, watch our kids get married. We might make chicken soup for each other in the rain. Don't you think we're major, not minor? When you smell the coffee brewing in the morning, you'll think of me because I'll be the one making the coffee," right? So it's a lot of these descriptions of just like the beautiful parts of everyday life. And there's some, it's a little bit writerly to me because some of those things we know that they actually go on to do because of how the play is set out of time. They see their kids get married, they fly kites, things like that. But one of the places where I really love when it lands is that she says, "I don't want it to fade. I'd give you more than a life if I could. I'm not supposed to say that because how long have we been dating? Not that long, even though I just know. You might say we're young. Sorry, skipping ahead a little bit. But I'd give you days and nights, the sun and moon and clouds if I could," which in its context at the beginning of their relationship is a very romantic thing to say. I want to give you a life. I want to give you days and nights. But when we see it after knowing that Vicky is probably going to die soon, it takes on a whole new meaning, right? They're like, "I'd give you life. I'd give you extra days and nights. I'd keep you alive longer if I could." And that to me is some of what like the play does. It says like that memory of this speech that you gave, trying to explain why you said this strange thing when she said, "I love you," takes on, it still has significance, even though your relationship is over. And it has a different significance now.
Yeah, it's kind of the changing of that posture. I love the I think we're major, not minor.
It's so great, isn't it?
Such a good line, and it like perfectly sums up what we've been kind of negotiating around this. It's such a good final kind of rich monologue at the end. In the last couple minutes of our conversation, I wanted to just turn to the kind of broader conversation of Marriage Month, and how this play is so different. We already alluded to it in our kind of earlier portion of the conversation. How this play, I love this play in the conversation, because of the way it plays with time, because of the broadness of the story. You get the sense in a lot of the other plays we've gone over, not all of them are going to be long-lasting marriages.
I mean, Romeo and Juliet, definitely not.
Definitely not. So I really appreciate this play for that other perspective of a longer span of this marriage.
Yeah, I think one of the perspectives of this play that the other plays we've talked about so far don't really have is that perspective on like divorce. I think that the other plays use, maybe not Romeo and Juliet so much, but Barefoot in the Park and The Light certainly use like the relationship ending as this kind of tragic thing to avoid.
Or a threat, yeah.
Or a threat, sure. But definitely as like if our relationship is the thing, the worst thing that could happen is that the relationship would end. And in Bright Half-Life, and we've talked a lot on this conversation about how Tanya does that so brilliantly in the non-linear stuff, that a relationship has like value in and of itself, value to each other, to their lives, to their understanding of their lives, and not so much. It's like the end of the relationship, while it's sad, is not presented as this like the end all, nuclear bomb of their lives. The play, for example, doesn't end with their divorce.
Right. Yeah. It's not structured as that is the way, because again, the like core of the play is them. And their relationship, whatever that relationship turns into, all because it's concerned with the entirety of their time, of their life together, because of the way that the relationship continues afterwards, and that's frankly the way that happens often. You don't, I mean, there are plenty of divorces that end with people never seeing each other again, but there are many of them that end with a lot of continued contact with each other, especially when kids are in the equation. So having the ability to shine a bit of the storytelling on that aspect is just a super valuable part of this play.
Absolutely. And I also think that like this play, it's like the relationship is, because we see it over like its whole life, that becomes kind of the protagonist of this play, right? I mean, if you think about The Light, it's like just the 70 minutes after the proposal and what's going to happen after that, whether they end up together or not, how the characters react to this thing that Janice has shared. You know, all that is sort of left to the audience to wonder about. And there's plenty to wonder about in this play. I don't want to imply that. But like the relationship, I think we know to some degree. I mean, there's still a little bit of like what's going to happen at the end, but we see the a much broader tale of the relationship and its ups and downs, its challenges, its goals kind of become the thing that we observe.
Yeah. There's a whole, again, there's so many great little storylines in this play. There's a whole beat of this play that is about trying whether or not to move across the country or not, or whether just Erica will move across the country for a job or not. And you kind of eventually there's the choices that are made do fuel the eventual breakup of the relationship. It's not the only reason, but there is that sort of like examination of those individual beats that gets to happen as a result of it.
Yeah, it's certainly like it's a, because it's such a like a taller view of a relationship. Like Romeo and Juliet and Barefoot in the Park and The Light are much more snippets. They're differently lengthed snippets. But this is like the life of a thing. And
Yeah.
that presents it in such a different light. The other thing that I think is important to say about this play and its view of marriage is that these are two characters who, for the large majority of the first part of the play, aren't legally allowed to get married. And that's a particular pain around the history of marriage globally, certainly. And that the play tracks, of something that for heterosexual people is like assumed to be like, well, you're gonna get married. You're gonna meet somebody and get married, and that's changing some now. But certainly there is like for as long as this country's been around, if you were a heterosexual person, it was just like, well, I could get married if I wanted to. And this play presents, a much more complex relationship with the actual institution of marriage.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite scenes that ends up speaking into that tension so well is the mattress buying scene.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. And again, it's split up over a large portion of the play. But every time we get to go back to it, they're in the mattress store trying to buy, the perfect mattress for themselves, and like the store clerk is either has stepped away for a minute and they're trying to decide whether or not he's judging them, whether or not he wants to watch, what exactly is going on with that. But in the midst of all that, they kind of overcome this sort of weight of that oppression, of that societal pressure, by like going into jumping on the bed, this kind of like this exuberant joy of still being together in amidst all of that pressure. And it's just such a great scene to be able to speak into what is kind of that broader societal level that is also being talked about in this play.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, Vicky's, I believe it's Vicky's parents are described as sort of like not progressive people. And so how Vicky presents Erica to her parents, we never meet the parents. We're only in conversations between the two of them about either what's about to happen or what has happened in the past, as like her special friend for a while. And then there comes, again, told out of chronological order, so we're getting snippets of this from across time. There comes this moment where they have kids together and they live together, and Erica still has to sort of see like, okay, what are we telling your parents now? Is it that I'm your special friend who helps you raise your kids?
Yep.
And then you get to the wedding and you learn that Vicky's parents have decided not to attend. And there's a decision to she's still so excited to marry Erica, sort of where that scene lands, even despite being sort of cast out, the family not being there to support it. So the family relationships are like all the relationships in this play, like we don't see the people. And so I think you very early in the conversation talked about how it sort of like focuses you, right? Like what we really see is the impact of that on them. And
Yeah.
that is what's so like stunning.
There are so many other scenes and other snippets of moments in this play that we could spend another, 30 minutes, hour, more minutes, 2 hours, more minutes, talking about. Alas, we are at the end of the time frame for this particular conversation on the show, but we'd love to keep chatting about this play with you. We'd love to kick the conversation out to all of you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and you know what? I think I'm gonna go make a Threads account. I think I'm done.
A Threads account.
I think we might be done
dork.
with X. So I think we're moving away from X. We'll be
never mind.
never mind.
Yeah.
But we'll be on the socials. You can find us on any of those sites. Also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those platforms. We'd love to keep chatting with you.
One more week of our themed month. Next week, we are talking about another very, very famous play, a play where marriage is as wonky and uncomfortable as you're ever likely to see it. So come back for that. And then the next week, so 2 episodes from now, join us for our special guest episode, a really, really great conversation about the music of Into the Woods. Hope you'll join us for that. If you liked this conversation, if you liked our theme month, this season, any of our other conversations, recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes conversations about writing, storytelling, themes, theater, any of that kind of stuff. Send them our way. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts. You can also like our Facebook page, and a link to the new episode appears right there for you to click and play every Monday. Until next week, when we're back with another episode of our theme month, I'm Jacob. That's Jackson. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.